Hi everyone. Can you all hear me well? Yes. Yes. So hi everyone. Welcome to our 9th meeting of the lecture series Young Prototypes. I'm gonna get started. We can get started as people keep joining the meeting. So welcome to our 9th meeting of the lecture series Young Prototypes. Today we have our guests, Kala, joining from Madrid, and Studio Becker joining from Chicago. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you also to our students and colleagues at MSU and the larger community joining from Bozeman, Montana, or elsewhere that have been joining us weekly in this lecture series. Please, especially our students, but all of you, if you want, turn on your videos so we can sense each other's presence throughout the lecture. Also, we will be recording this session, so please write to us in the chat if anyone has a problem with this. And before we jump into the introductions, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to Young Prototypes, which is a series of talks hosted by Montana State University and curated by Frank Barkow, Laura Salazar, and myself, where we address the reciprocity between thinking and building, or building and thinking, through the voice of emerging practices and practitioners. We are interrogating the role of design research and criticality in a contemporary practice invested particularly in building. And more generally, we're curious about how our peers approach the possibilities of architecture today. In today's session, we will have another back-to-back lecture with Kala and Studio Becker. And after we hear from our lecturers, we will open up a session to discussion, like every week, led today by our student, Nick Malik. Everyone is welcome to participate by raising your hand on Zoom, writing in the chat, or just unmuting and asking a question or a comment. So I'll introduce our guests today. Firstly, Kala, in order of presentation, is formed by Sofia Romeo and Miguel Sotos, which is a Madrid-based practice that was founded in 2016. Kala combines architectural practice with woodworking, focused on giving solutions through a paused process, collaborating with small local industries, craftsmen, and a wide production of details and furniture handcrafted at their own workshop, which is an amazing space. We believe that architecture reveals itself, that's what they say, through the connections that we make between landscape, culture, heritage, and materiality. Kala is working in significant projects, developing its practice through private commissions on housing, office, and mixed-use projects. They are also actively participating in editorial projects from a long, long time ago through Galmo Editions, an independent publishing house funded in 2020. They both co-direct Ornamental Journal, a carefully crafted monograph publication, which we were lucky enough that they shipped all the way to Montana from Madrid to us, the latest issue dedicated to Glenn Murcutt's Simpson Lee house, and its amazing details, which are really good for today's talk. It's a fantastic travel diary through photographs that takes us all the way to the house from wherever we are. And Studio Becker, which we'll present second, is a Chicago-based architecture and design studio led by Sharon Xu and Robert Becker. And Sharon and Robert met while designing at Princeton School of Architecture. Their collaboration brings together complementary backgrounds in architecture. On the one hand, Sharon's systematic thinking and creative problem solving, and on the other hand, Robert's adept understanding of craft and assembly to form a multifaceted approach to design. In addition to their practice, they are also educators at the Illinois Institute of Technology at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And also they have a manifesto, and this is really relevant to our students who have to go through a similar process. or maybe I don't know if they would call it a manifesto, but they describe their process through 5 points, which I will read now, and then we can start with the lectures. We view each project as an opportunity to create something highly personal yet accessible. We listen and work closely with you to define your needs and goals for the project. We consider context to ensure a project fits within a wider ecological and social cultural community. We seek to amplify your ambitions into compelling concepts that will endure to provide lasting value. We build strong relationships, fostering collaboration and communication for a smooth project delivery. So it seems from what we know and see of the work of both practices today, that a lot of what they do intersects with their passions, hobbies, and lifestyles, from publications to woodworking to photography. We're really looking forward to learn more from the amazing craft of these two inspiring practices. So please, without further ado, Miguel and Sofia, please take it away.
All right. Thank you, Pablo. All right, we should share, no? Wait a minute.
There we go.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Pablo, for the introduction, and thank you again for inviting us. We've been following the previous presentations and we had a lot of fun. So congratulations for organizing this. We want to be brief. We're going to talk about two projects, but first, we would like to show the office where we work in Madrid. In 2020, we decided to move to this former car workshop and refurbish it. And the idea was to join the studio and the workshop, since Miguel had some carpentry background. And as you see, well, the idea was to be able to build large-scale models and one-to-one scale prototypes, and of course furniture and many different things, no? But this is always like a in progress thing, and well, this is always like a in progress.
Yeah, totally. Like as we rent this workshop, but actually we never finished the refurbishment. No, it was like a process during. So we were working there, but at the beginning it was really cold. No, and we had the workshop, but at the same time it was the studio. But we have to continue working on the workshop and continue to design new things. For example, this facade. No, that we stayed like 2 years without facade, but at some point we decided to craft one and to start like creating this space, and so that the space somehow fits our needs, no? And it was an evolution. It was not something like fixed and well, we'll design like this and that, and that's it, no?
Yeah. So the idea was to like sometimes you think that I will start my practice, no, and then just everything is instant, but we think that things are take its time necessarily. So that's why we realize now when making things and moving to this big space that necessarily things take time. So we try to position ourselves in this way, no? But yeah, so this is the office, and now Pablo saw it and it's quite finished.
Better.
So we have facade, and this winter was okay. Yeah. So we are going to talk about two projects. Both projects are in very different scale, but they are in a similar state. They are both about to be finished, the construction. And it's been a large process for both projects, and I think for us it's like a milestone. And I'm going to talk about first this kindergarten that it was a public competition that we won in 2020, during quarantine actually. So there were no competitions in Spain, and we decided to go for this with Janja Susnar, Anna Herman, and a Slovene office directed by Marusa Sorek. And so just for you to have an idea where is this, Slovenia, it's a small country in Europe. It's right in between Austria and Croatia and north of Italy. So it's a very small country. For us, it was a bit unknown, so completely a discovery for us. And to have an idea, it's like 2.5 hours driving from Venice, so which is quite close, no? Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 main aspects of these projects. One is more related with landscape and community. Second one is more related with programmatic issues, and third one is more related with structure and materiality. When you first go to Slovenia, you discover these amazing hay racks. That's how they're called. It's farm wooden structures that are just dispersed in this alpine region. And they're basically used to storage farm objects or machinery, or dry wood or other elements of the activity of the agriculture. But this was like the first thing that caught our eyes when we were there. And yeah, so this is the place, no? This is the place where we had to build the kindergarten. So you can see that landscape is quite a really strong element that we had to deal with, no? Mm-hmm. So basically, these were some skins of the competition. So I'm going to explain some of the components of the strategies that we went through. Mm-hmm. We had like an existing school, primary school, and this was like an extension. If you think of a kindergarten, you may think of a small building, but this is actually like 3,000 square meter building, which is quite large for this program. And this is because it had some kitchens, offices that was going to be used for the school. So we had to take into account the pre-existing. No? So in order to engage with the community and to understand how the things work there, because of course for us it's a foreign country, so first of all, you are a bit in the back, no? How should I intervene here with sensitivity, no? And enough to really understand, of course, the conditioning issues and the cultural elements that you have there, no? Which is not very easy at the beginning, of course, if you can try to read, but Slovenian is a language that it's impossible to understand, even though when you are in the meeting, like, even though you try to, no, it's impossible. No, so for us, it's been like a huge process of trying to communicate with the other team, no, and of course with the authorities and the other well, the engineers especially, that are very hard to deal with, no. But yeah, so this first strategy, which is in this alpine region, you have these different elements and typologies that are always organized in 3, and in a number of 3, and then they are arranged in a way that they create this intermediate space that is meant to be a place for gathering for the community. And so there are very strong identity elements that could help us to incorporate it to the project. So the people there could actually understand and feel like they belong, that building will belong to them, no? So not impose like a new element, but actually to create something that they already were able to recognize it, no? So yeah, with this structure of 3 buildings, we could at the same time connect with the existing school and be able to organize the program that we had. And actually there was this third element, which is the smallest house, is the gym, but this was actually not in the competition. There was something that we added extra. We think that was something that made us win, or at least was a really positive in a way when we talked to them, because it was a multi-purpose space just for the community, no? So they could go there, and how do you connect like a urban element, which is in the, you know, how can you connect a new building with the existing community? So this was also like an extra thing that we just added in a way to improve the program. Yeah, so this is a model that always help us to understand better the project, and this will be like the entrance and also the gathering space where you can join with the rest of the community and kids. The second element is the gang. This is a Slovene word. It means balcony, but it's like a specific element of the traditional architecture. And we use this to organize the whole program. And in a way, we wanted the gang to be all over the building, and except for the cores that have the services, the kitchen and the bathroom, the rest would be like a fluid space and like a continuous gang as a continuous playground. No? This also allowed us to connect south facade to the north facade. This is all open to the southeast, which is the best orientation here. So we could allow the maximum light possible. And this is a model that where you can see actually how this works, no? How the space that distributes the aula is at the same time connected with the course, and everything could be a playground. And yeah, so this is left picture is an aula, so before doors. This is progress pictures, but and then you see the upper balcony, which is the more modern gang, let's say. And then the lower level, it's more like a service part. Yeah, more kitchens, and so they're open to the north side. But again, everything is like a succession of continuous space. No? And so these linear elements that are found everywhere in the landscape, it's really super impressive, you know, how they're so well done, and they maintain them, and they use them still today. We of course we took that and we tried to use it as for ourselves for the building, and to be the element that organized all the space, no, structure, with only one kind of what kind of truss. Even if the 3 buildings have the same structure, it's just a repetitive element. And this is a bit funny because we first had one engineer, and we had all the calculations almost done, but it was more like in the execution process. Yeah, but like in the middle of the execution project just left. So we were like, we had no engineer, and we had hola, hi.
Hi,
Hi.
we're kind of losing you.
No.
But no,
Now
now
it's
you're
better.
back. Yeah.
Okay, just let me know, because otherwise I will keep talking. Okay. So I was saying that at some point the engineer just left. So we had no engineer. We had no. We delivered like a executive project without the structural details, and we were like sold completely to whatever the subcontractor was going to say, no, and we didn't know who was going to take charge of this. But suddenly the subcontractor was a carpenter company that was of a family of carpenters that had a company, and they could recalculate all the structure details, and then somehow they recalculated in a way that it was locally conceived, no? So we had no control no longer of the details of this construction. Of course, everything is Slovene, so impossible. But at the end, we had like an amazing work of these people, no? So this was very, I don't know, surprising, but interesting at the same time.
There's just that in this picture, there's an interesting thing that actually in Slovenia for centuries, they use this half-lap joinery for a long time. And actually they redesigned all the building with this use, no? So they created the framing with this half-lap here, no? And here. So that was beautiful, no? That actually when we arrived to the construction site, this, I know we just found this, they were like joining them, and it was like really a nice moment, no? Because suddenly you saw that actually the construction, it was, I don't know, getting along with the place, which was all the traditional culture.
Yeah, like we are really used to think that wood is no longer like properly done, at least in Spain. So when we got there and we saw all this, it was like, wow, really, I don't know, at least for us, it was quite a thing, no? So, well, there are many things to talk about, but for example, this is the summer classroom. This is the end of the building, and we wanted to make like it's the same footprint as a classroom, but it's an open space looking to a garden, to an orchard. And this classroom is special because it has all the structures in. We left everything. And then some parts of the building, of course, we could leave it open. So yeah, I think this is it on my side. Your turn. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're on time, so perfect.
Yeah, it really worked.
Well, I'm going to talk about the second project, which is relatively small in comparison with the Slovenian school. And this is well, we call it Red House, but I don't know, it has many names because, well, it says 2019, 2023, but I don't know, it came from way back, like 2015 or so. But well, at least like the starting point was in 2018, 2019, and it's a private house. And we were given this plot, no, like that is quite irregular with a lot of pre-existence, old walls, new walls, in this small village in Segovia, a little bit to the north from Madrid, 1 hour by car, 1 hour and 30 minutes. And there is this traditional way of building with well, actually the soil in this area is completely red because it has a lot of iron in it, no, in the composition. So all the village is actually built with our redstone or these finishings in sand mixed with soil, with the red sand or the red soil mixed with sand or concrete. And actually a lot of wood that is not seen, but actually is painted black. And in the inner part and the inner structure is has a lot of wood. No? So we were given this, and this was actually, this picture is in July 2018. But what happened actually is that we were, I don't know, we did a couple of projects or at least like possibilities, of a two-story house, like with similar techniques. It was like the main idea at the beginning. But somehow, specifically in November, just 4 months after, I went to Japan to learn Japanese carpentry. So actually, this completely changed the project. I always bring these pictures because, well, there's many things to talk about Japan and the experience there. But I always use these images when we give a small lecture or something like that, because I think it's quite useful for students and also for our peers, because also all the understanding in Japan about wood and actually how they understand material, how they treat it, how they respect it is really important. No, it's not only like building in wood, but actually knowing specifically which piece of the tree has which kind of purpose, how could all this wood be used specifically in certain areas, how the trees grow, where are their strengths in a tree, how can you use a beam as an arc, or you can use a couple of beams as a supporting point, how you can use the inner structure of the tree to fulfill your intentions or to build more accordingly to its nature, no? How you can cut it, you can dry it, how it's going to change shape with time and also with the drying process. And this, well, I took this from a really beautiful book. Actually, Japanese also have this tradition of drawing everything really nicely. And well, all these, for example, this is really beautiful as well, how you cut how the wood has an orientation, no, in the inner structure of the tree can be used in a structure. No, this is really wise and really beautiful. It's really difficult nowadays because they cut all the trees like that, and anyone like identify the wood. But well, I want to go like fast on about it. But well, this drawing, I really like it because actually the carpenters has this main idea, no? Like you sit there just in front of the plan, and then somehow in your mind, like all these beams like fly around, no? And then you start to realize how you're going to build something and which piece are going to be in a specific place, no? And well, they have this tradition and they have many drawings about that, but all this family of joinery. So now this kind of efforts, also these hands express it beautifully, no? How everything works in compression, and I don't know. This is something that really changed my mind, and also it was really difficult to try to do it here in Spain. But well, I learned the techniques, how you sharpen the tools, how you do this kind of journey, how you arrive to this kind of precision and to be this accurate, no? And also, well, during this trip, I went to Ryoanji Temple, which is in Kyoto. It's really known for this dry garden with stones, no? But well, I was also like this image that is the back side of this really famous temple. It was this, no? It's the way out, no? When you go, you see the dry garden, and then you go the way out, and this just stay in my mind, I believe, no? And then when we went back to Madrid, somehow this plot that I was that we designed in a really different way, well, we thought that maybe it could be a pavilion. This was also really catchy to the client because we told them like, well, actually, if you choose one beam and one pilar and you multiply so many times, then you have the cheapest structure possible. And it was like, oh, right, so I'm saving a lot of money. It's not going to be that big, no, the house, but actually I'm going to save a lot. And actually, just in the village nearby, it was a really nice carpenter. Now he's a friend, but he is a craftsman that actually did all the work in the house, no, with us as well. We collaborate and we did some part of the carpentry work, and we did this 100 and 150 models because these allow us to organize ourselves and also to try to find the dimensions, no? Each model has a purpose, but to find the specific dimensions on the project and find solutions also for the structure, no? Well, this is just we were trying to find the solution for the eave, so we just did this model specifically to see the cuts in the beams, how they are going to, to support itself. And So we did this project. Actually, the structure, which was the beams and the pillars, it was really useful because it allowed us to establish a module, and this module helped us to, I don't know, to create so many things related to this module, which is double rafters for the floor structure, also main rafters for the roof structure. So everything, with this model somehow became like the motive for all the project, which was quite beautiful and at the same time quite challenging because everything has to fit to this pattern, And then, well, it's not Japan, but it's Segovia. So we found this carpenter, where he was using, I don't know, joinery that he learned from his father and all the guild that was working here. So it was more basic, but actually we could, I don't know, at least introduce some of the things that were local here, and we could transport it in a I don't know, with a truck, which was really nice, because at some point we were like behind the truck, like following, going to the place, and all that house was traveling there, So it was really beautiful as well to see. I mean, there's a lot of advantages always working with wood, and this is one of them. But it was beautiful also to be present there, Like it's traveling there, and one thing that was even more beautiful is that they built it in 1.5 days, which was really nice. They just arrived, they moved it with everything, and they started with the screws, so that they prepared everything in their own way. And they built all the structure. We had to do for sure a foundation, because all these walls that you see previously, it was terrible, and we had to do a foundation to sustain the other the surrounding. And well, so then when we had the main structure, we had to, I don't know, to find a solution for a lot of details. There's many things. This is I don't know, it's quite simple, but actually it's a lot of years work here. But actually, if you see carefully, like there is solid wood here that is going to be seen, and solid wood that is going to be seen here, but there is this panel. There's this rafter that is collaborating with the beam. Actually, there are like so many details in here. Also, the flooring is aligned with the bottom beam, and also with the glass. So there is a complete direct connection between the inner part and the outside part. So there are like these kind of things that actually, these double rafters that makes allow you to put electricity down, to go in the middle of the room. There are like so many details, and also these kind of solutions, actually was not that neat, but these rafters collaborating with the beam and putting long rafters allow us to have a longer eave, and also this steel plate allow us to have, well, we have to use ceramic tiles because it's the regulation in the area, and this steel plate allow us to have a completely straight line at the end of the eave, So we start to craft these small details and build also the roof structure as best as we could. And well, this is just once we installed the ceramic tiles, and there's this line that we did. And then we have to design the inner structure, the partitions that had the small program. The house is completely open to the garden, and it's only one room, but then has small partitions like where there's the kitchen, the bathroom. And then we have to measure the dimensions on the height, the relationship with existing walls. And we went back to the workshop with another craftsman, also nearby here. Actually, it's quite strange how you can't find a craftsman in Madrid, but actually, I don't know, 100 kilometers from there is like, I don't know, 20, and really good ones, actually. And then in the inner partitions, we started crafting ourselves the inner parts, and we start to develop some kind of Japanese joinery, also crafting some metal steel plates to support the beams, or the pillars, and then these two squares represent actually how in Japan they square a joinery with two beams, and there is no light in between. Then that means that it's completely square. When there is no light in between two squares, that means that's 90 degree. Well, our showing this that actually you can still, if you have enough patience, the possibility to build this way, or at least a small part, And this is the plans of the inner partition partitions, and we could build this without a single screw. And this is how the house is getting along with this being to pilot joinery. The space, you can see here there's more rafters of the floors of the floor structure, and this is how it's now. How it's finishing. And we are this well, this is like, it's from the bottom part, but actually, if you remember the plot, it's quite a corner with the church at the back, and we could create this garden as well and everything, no? And just to finish, I wanted to say briefly that we titled the lecture or the presentation in the making. And I don't know, for us, it's quite it's an expression that doesn't have a specific translation in Spanish. I don't know, no, but it's kind of a tricky phrase, no, in the making, because it's kind of a staying in a process, but also how you are involved in the process and how you are making and being made at the same time, no? So we like this idea of that trying to develop your own architecture or be involved in the process of doing architecture could be at the same time to evolve, no, to have an evolution yourself, and not trying to find a specific outcome of I want to do this or that. It's like more like a process, no? In the process of 5 years, then you are going to achieve some kind of knowledge, and with that you are going to be able to make in a more precise way, no? Which I believe you need time to expertise a little bit on what you do to arrive to better a better outcome, no? So, well, that's it. I hope we are not really late.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Our pleasure.
Just jump straight in ours, right?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. So yeah, first off, thank you, Pablo, for the very nice introduction and for describing our description of our office as a manifesto. I would say maybe it's a working manifesto. And thank you both, Pablo and Lara, for the invitation to be a part of this conversation. So our talk is titled Ways of Seeing, because I think for us, we simply think about design and representation as a way of seeing and experiencing things differently, and design also as a way of communicating new perspectives. And so Robert and I started our collaboration about 2 years ago, just really as a way for us to make things, share ideas, and talk about what was on our minds before we decided to form Studio Becker Shoe last year. And our design process, I think, is something that's still very much evolving, but we like to begin each process with just curiosity and observation. And so I think we approach design from a sort of journalistic point of view of gathering information and taking stock of our environment and sort of assessing and presenting those observations before starting to design. So Studio Becker Shoe really started as a series of conversations, or I guess a really long conversation on a cross-country road trip that we took in our move from LA to Chicago. So these are a selection of artifacts that we gathered from that trip. And these weren't really necessarily collected with any specific logic in mind, just sort of seeing without thinking, and usually in a very spontaneous way, just out of pure appreciation of these objects. And then once we arrived in Chicago, we organized these naturally designed objects into 2 collections. And for us, that act of curation was a way to compose somewhat intuitively, while also observing more rationally the scale, forms, textures, and colors of these different objects to create a kind of typology through time and space. And I think in doing so, also giving meaning to these seemingly unimportant pieces of debris, because for us, they represented this cross-section of our travels and experiences of different landscapes. And so I think the act of organizing these objects
into catalogs really allowed them for us to be seen in their plurality as distinct individual elements that might lack meaning in isolation, but until they're sort of viewed as part of a larger collection. So although this isn't directly related to architecture or building, it sort of represents our approach to design thinking. One image that we really like and are always coming back to are these worksheets for sculpture from the 1940s that were studies of sculptures made by Noguchi. And so it represents a single moment in his artistic process where he would cut out what he intended to sculpt and then paste the shapes onto graph paper as a way to sort of plan its construction. I think some of them eventually translated into physical sculptures, but some of them never made it off this page here. So the catalog here isn't really about the final constructed piece, but I think speaks to a working process that's also a kind of work of art in and of itself.
Other artists we always have in mind as we work are Bernd and Hilla Becker and their anonymous sculptures. If anyone hasn't heard of them, Bernd and Hilla Becker were German photographers who basically just systematically photographed industrial structures across Europe and the US. But in the spirit of these artists, we adopted a similar objective lens and documented 64 unique pipe fittings commonly found at the local hardware store. So in this image here, that's just the aisle at the Home Depot. By reformatting these objects in a different way through orthographic photos and drawings, we see them in a new way, at a new scale that begins to maybe impart architectural meaning. So you might imagine them as monumental facades or inhabitable thresholds. And through this just simple exercise of cataloging, it reveals the nuances of their form and tectonic. Some fittings are cast from a single mold, others are made up of interlocking parts, while some are just thin sheets of metal that are folded and wrapped. They all have their own distinct form and material characteristics. Quick studies like this are just useful for us as a way of speculating on building without actually necessarily making a building or something that results in a building. We often turn to photography as a way of continuously cataloging what we're seeing. Between the two of us, we're almost always in the presence of a camera, in addition to our phones. One day we're driving through southern Michigan, we stumbled on this concrete block plant. And here are some photos from that day. Initially, we're just interested in the formal and tectonic properties of these blocks, how they were organized, stacked, and stored on the site, but also then the range of shapes from different uses in construction as lintels and jambs for openings, bullnose blocks with rounded corners, scored blocks. Basically, you score the block and you're able to kind of like knock the block in half. Blocks for running conduit through them, and many other types. So we ended up only taking a few return corner pieces home with us. Just curious about how we could maybe recast the role of this object from a ready-made building material with a very specific use to a more generic shape-shifting module. So a small collection of 4 blocks is roughly the size of a side table, and you can see kind of on the top left and bottom right how we've kind of put it to use in our own space, holding our knickknacks. The idea of permutation and how something can have multiple outcomes is a theme that we like to explore in our work, and that can manifest as iterations on form, as well as thinking about flexibility in use and function. Because we basically believe that as designers, we need to be flexible, that our designs should also be adaptable for different situations, different preferences, different contexts.
So this was a small design build project that we completed very recently. It was a commissioned chicken coop, actually, for a family who wanted to grow their collection of chickens. But the project sort of started with just really needing to understand how chickens live. We've never owned chickens before. So really learning the details of how they feed, how they nest, how they lay eggs, and how we as humans interact with them. And so the first step of our design process was really just visualizing the required sizes for all the essential functions of the coop, and then examining their relationships to one another in this sort of spatial sequence diagram that we made. And something in the design process that we found kind of strange, but also compelling, was the ambiguous scale of the coop. Like, we were constantly designing something that was too big to be an object, but also too small to be a building. And so I would say, even though from one perspective, we designed it to be a very utilitarian house for the chickens from within, we're also interested in how the coop could be viewed and experienced as a sort of sculpture that you engage with in the round, and in sort of designing that perception you have of it when walking around it. So this was the same model that was photographed before, but we kind of wanted to see it in a new way. And so this project that we thought would actually be a very simple structure turned out to have a lot of design constraints. We realized pretty quickly that chickens are actually very picky clients, but there were super strict restrictions on the shape and size of the various elements and functions that they needed to serve. So we were kind of faced with this challenge of maximizing the design effect with limited means of intervention. So a lot of the design had to come through just subtle plays in proportion and composition. Color obviously also played a very important role for us in synthesizing this collection of parts. And so we thought of the coop kind of as this Swiss Army knife, where different moments of utility are all composed on a single armature. And part of the client's vision for the coop was to be a project that they could build together with us and also with their family. So here are some construction photos, but basically the construction logic and cost all had to remain very practical, so that they were using materials that would be accessible for them, and they would know how to work with. And so this is kind of that collaborative process of construction. But ultimately, I think it was a very unique experience for us designing for chickens as one of our first projects, because they were clients that couldn't really communicate back to us. And I think that's something that both of us as young designers, like that kind of communication between client and architect, is something we're still learning to navigate in a lot of ways. And so I think this project really forced us to take a very empathetic perspective of anticipating the user's needs when they weren't able to communicate it to us themselves. So shifting now to an unbuilt project, but at the human scale. So recently we were shortlisted to participate in a competition to reimagine missing middle infill housing here in Chicago. So the competition, which resulted in an exhibition, we were really interested in focusing on the 2-flat, which is a building typology that's very quintessentially Chicago. I think they make up about 1/3 of the total housing stock here in Chicago. So they're very prolific across all of the neighborhoods here. There are many variations, as you can see here. So these are drawings by a local artist, Phil Thompson. But essentially what defines a 2-flat is that it's a stacked duplex with a unit on each floor. They were originally built in the early 1900s as a way of financially supporting working class immigrant families who moved to Chicago, who could live on one floor while renting out the other floor, so that the rental income that was coming in could cover their cost of mortgage. But recently, there's been this phenomenon in Chicago of a lot of these existing 2-flats being deconverted to single family houses. So that's kind of greatly reduced the affordable housing and the density of housing here in the city. And so we were interested in our design reinforcing the importance of these 2 homes on a shared lot. But at the same time, rethinking the typology and to kind of find a balance between remaining contextual to the city and this building that has a lot of history, while also speculating on how your home could change how you engage with your neighbors. So our design, I guess one of the other things that our design was a reaction to was our perception of the lack of open space in the city. So the standard Chicago lot is really long and narrow. It's 125 feet. So we saw an opportunity there with the elongated proportions to insert open space in the middle of the lot. And at the same time, also expanding these kind of corridors, very narrow alleyways. They're called gangways here, but they're very narrow and they're underutilized usually between lots. So expanding those to become more accessible pathways. And at the same time, we minimized the building footprint so that it was within about 50% of the actual buildable area on the lot within the setbacks. And so, and then that we kind of broke up the first floor into these two parts to create a shared open space at the middle of the site. And one of the things about the traditional 2-flat is that the stacked configuration means that one unit is elevated and removed from the street, which really creates this kind of lack of equal access and identity for the two cohabitants. So our design reorganizes the two units back to back so that there's equal access from the front, from the ground floor. And there have also been these changing regulations here in Chicago that allow accessory dwelling units now in certain neighborhoods. So it's this like additional structure on the site. So with that, the back alley of these lots, which historically has been a very, again, underutilized space, and kind of this back of house space has become a second front and a sort of new public space for the city. And so instead of privileging one face, we designed the home to have two distinct fronts, one that's alley facing and one that's street facing. And even though the competition was, we were only really tasked with thinking about the design of a single private residence, we saw it as an opportunity to also imagine new forms of community through these shared outdoor spaces that we were proposing. So on the left is an image of that kind of chain of covered porches. And then the worm's eye view on the right was for us a way of showcasing and seeing the potential interactions at the neighborhood scale and sort of imagining how the aggregation of this new typology of 2-flats could start to produce different scales of open space for a block.
We're going a little bit out of order chronologically, but jumping back in time to the first project of our office, we were given the opportunity to design a home for a family member. It's actually wrapping up construction this month. We just got back this past weekend. It was our first time collaborating on a building project together. So it's very much a catalyst for us to prototype our own design process. It was really a humbling experience actually for us to, in terms of learning just how difficult and complicated a construction process actually is. So navigating cost, availability of materials, and labor, especially during the pandemic, and working with clients that also have specific aesthetic preferences and expectations. The house is located on a 10-acre site in North Carolina. You can see the red North Carolina clay on the left image, which actually makes it pretty difficult to build there. It's a really, really dense, so you usually do not build down that much. Usually the homes are kind of lifted off the ground a little bit or just set a few feet under kind of grade. But we were immediately drawn to the natural features on the site. There's a natural clearing on the north end of the property with a pond on the one side and an open meadow on the other. So we really let the surroundings guide the impetus for the design. And we sited the home in the cluster of trees facing these two distinct site conditions. Initial site visit is always a critical moment for us, being able to experience a place firsthand. And this is just us taking it all in, discussing some initial thoughts with the clients. Part of the inspiration for the home also came from the historic context. The common housing typology in the Southeast US is the dog trot house, which is essentially two log cabins, sleeping quarters on one side, living quarters on the other, with an open breezeway between the two, with a single roof tying the two lower volumes together. We sometimes find it really helpful to just see through abstraction and simplification. Architecture is a really complicated craft, so the simpler you can communicate an idea, the better. We adapted the idea of the breezeway from the dog trot into an interior space that could transform to be an exterior space with full height sliding doors on either end of the home that also provides cross ventilation. This breezeway also serves as a central axis for the house around which everything is organized. It's a corridor, it's a living space, and it's a space that projects your experience and views out towards the landscape. This model shows the early design concept for the house, which is just 4 single-story volumes tied together by a wood platform that's an occupiable loft, and then a 100-foot long gable roof that rests on top of the, basically to enclose the spaces on the first floor. When building, you often work with many consultants, including structural engineers, and they provide their own way of seeing and problem solving, which can be really, really kind of like a fruitful process. In the case of this project, it really expanded our own perspective and helped us to advance the design and make it more efficient. One example of this, we had designed the gable to be resting on top of these lower volumes, like in our concept model. But in talking to the structural engineer, we learned that the wood loft platform and flat roofs for the 4 volumes could actually function structurally as diaphragms to resist the horizontal thrust from the gable, which would allow us then to have an open cathedral ceiling without any rafter ties and avoid a more expensive structural solution. So we basically shifted the face of the structural glulam beams down to attach to the face of each of the 4 volumes, while keeping the roof assembly resting on top of these beams and above the rest of the house. Here are some images of that gable under construction. On the left are when the glulam beams first went up. Then the middle image shows the pine ceiling that bridges between the beams, which is both the finished and structural material. It's actually glulam decking that allows us to achieve a ceiling assembly that was thinner and stronger than your typical framed out roof. The glulam decking also allowed us to achieve these unsupported spans at the porches at both ends of the house and carry the material from inside the home to outside. We did end up needing to add structural steel at the ends to prevent the roof from splaying out. So the image all the way on the right, the black edge is a kind of steel V, welded steel V piece, and then you have the columns kind of carrying down the load. It's also been particularly interesting seeing the project through our collaborators' eyes, like our metal fabricator, Leo Gev, who installed all the structural steel for the home. It's just fascinating for us to see into their process and what kind of things they find interesting about the project and also their own work. So here on the left, they're trying to figure out how to get the columns set perfectly plumb and then align the columns with a roof that does not yet exist. In the middle, their process of installing these steel gable braces, which had to be craned into place. And then on the right are some images of the folded steel plate stair that he's fabricating for the stair up to the loft. Here's some images of the house coming together from this past weekend. In addition to just being a home, we like to think of the house as a device for viewing the landscape that we really try to design both from the inside out and outside in, considering how the landscape is experienced from within the home and also how the house appears as a figure in the landscape. So throughout the design process, we've had to produce representation for different audiences to communicate different ideas, from quick sketches and diagrams that we pass between just Sharon and myself, to a concept model for the client, to dimension plans for the contractor and permitting, to just observations on the site throughout construction via drone photography. Each variation of the plan was like applying a different filter for viewing the project, and with each filter, we were constantly learning something new, which helped us reflect on our own understanding of what we had already done, and ultimately to evolve and improve the design from a simple bar in the landscape at the top left to a complex tectonic of collaged pieces on the bottom right. So, this first construction project for us was very much an exercise in how to see. We wanted to end on these 2 images from our road trip. They're of the same dunes, but just shot from very different scales and perspectives. And maybe this is just because our practice is still super young, but we're still very much in the process of workshopping our own methods of seeing and thinking. Part of us believes that, this is something that will never fully be defined, and it's constantly shifting and evolving over time as we take on new projects at different scales and types. So it's kind of funny that, you started by reading the 5 points of our sort of, our manifesto, because we were just talking earlier today, like, wait, we should probably update our website, because I mean, part of that is still true, but we are constantly changing. So that's it.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Oh, you guys should. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. Well, we really appreciate you guys giving us your time and sharing these projects with us. You guys, both of your guys' design teams seem to have had some really cool opportunities here and there, from like working on these schools in the middle of nowhere, as well as like working on a chicken coop, like some pretty cool opportunities you guys have gotten to work on. I guess I'm gonna ask a couple questions, but as I'm doing that, if people want to raise their hands and step in, and I'll let people ask questions as well along the way. But I guess my first question is to both of you guys, or to all four of you guys, since you guys are both a team of two and seem to have some interesting backgrounds behind each individually. How would you guys say your skills have overlapped and developed throughout your time working together? And how have maybe someone brought something to the table that then became like just like a thing that you guys continue to do through your design process? I'll pass that off to you guys, and whoever wants to go first can jump in.
Maybe we'll start. So I used to work at an architectural model making company here in Chicago. I worked there after undergrad. It was really interesting seeing the other projects from the other office, because just the level of craft involved in kind of your buildings is unbelievable. The precision involved, and I kind of had a similar experience working for a model making company, where like everything had to be absolutely precise, and so I'm used to working with my hands.
At a different scale. At
a very different scale, obviously, yeah. But so my process has always been through model making, basically. And that wasn't something necessarily that Sharon, I mean, you had to make models in school.
I think I also enjoyed making models, but we had different ways of making models that I think once we started working together, I think Robert's like kind of ultra precision merged with some of my a little bit more like thinking about models in a maybe more experimental or like less traditional way. And I think like that has helped us. Models are definitely something that's important to our practice. But I think both of our model making techniques have evolved because of working together.
Yeah.
I would say also, I think like for these different projects, our process has also sort of changed. Like for the chicken coop, I remember the process was very much like us sitting together at a computer, like both kind of charetting on, the design at once. And for the house, we've slowly started to kind of pass on the responsibilities and kind of, I guess, more like relay the responsibilities to each other, more so as we've learned more about how we each work together. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, definitely. No, yeah, that's super cool. And I guess to expand the question a little bit further, I'm curious if like, and this is for both you guys, but just to expand upon the question, like, have you found yourselves design strategies coming to being way more like similar to each other, or do you find that you guys both work completely differently and that you both have completely different approaches to these things?
Well, I can, following the previous question also, I feel like each project. Of course, I think also for your answer that it's always like a constant conversation, but also I think that each project has a nature and like a personality. And when you start this conversation about the project, you start feeling how like the weight of it, and I think each of us has, of course, complementary backgrounds, and naturally it feels like one project perhaps goes on one path, and maybe Miguel take the lead of it, and then I complement it, but we keep the conversation, no? So and then we fight a lot because it's super complicated, and we've been maybe 10 years discussing and also trying to understand each other, no? Because you grow, you're not the same when you finish architecture than now. So there's a in progress process, and
Also,
yeah.
also not only one thing that for example, I experienced myself in the relationship with Sofia, but also with the office, is that at the beginning, when you just finish your education, when you go out and you start your professional activity, somehow you believe that your perspective or your personal perspective is really clear and rational. No, it's like you can feel really trust on how you see things, and you have to sometimes, well, I mean, it is good to learn that sometimes you are not right, and also to doubt a little bit on your way of seeing things, and also learn to listen to the other person. For example, that on our relationship, for example, I had that problem. I was like more stubborn, and no, this has to be like that. And also learning to listen to the other person also makes it makes all the projects or all the work part of both, no? And I believe that that's one of the, aside from the professional work, it is good for your personal life as well, no?
Yeah, but it's not only between us, but for example, the Slovenian project, we had to deal with a whole like a whole different team of architects with their own issues and with their own language, with their own culture, and it was like the biggest effort was to have like a better relationship at the end than at the beginning, and that was, I think, the hardest part of the project. And I think we are really happy that we kept the relationship with the people, because I don't know, it's not only inside the team, but also that you never work alone, so you always have to deal with other agents now. Like sometimes you have to join forces to find, like, you have a bigger enemy, or I don't know, like a bigger challenge outside. I don't know if you agree.
Just to quickly build on that, yeah, like architecture is always collaborative. Like, you know, even if we weren't working together, I was working alone, or Sharon were working alone, like you're collaborating with the consultants, the contractors, the people, the clients. So it's not, you know, you're not isolated in a bubble, right? And also we do fight a lot too.
But I think that we have a kind of like productive friction, and that helps advance our design process. Like, I think it's natural to get creative blocks sometimes, right? When you're designing just by yourself. And so I think for us, that ongoing conversation that Miguel and Sofia mentioned is also happening and helping propel our design forward in ways that, you know, one person has blind spots potentially, and then the other person kind of steps in and fills in that part of the design. And so and that goes for our collaboration, and again, also with consultants like the structural engineer and clients.
Cool, thank you guys. It's funny because we're currently working in a group studio right now, and it's quite a process. So it's there's a big learning curve to it, and it's been a lot of fun and also a lot of fighting. So that's just how it goes. I'll pass the mic over to Matt over here.
Hi guys, I had a question. We're getting some feedback. I had a question directed towards Miguel and Sophia. I just want to say that I really appreciate the understanding of Japanese woodworking in construction and the appreciation and application shows of these principles that shows kind of in your projects and or that specific project highlight that you were showing, Miguel, because it's not as conventional necessarily as today's means and methods, but it produces a beautiful result that expresses the process and the process through construction. So I would just say I really enjoy that, and I was kind of curious how do you suppose that you could bring these these more these Japanese means and methods that you studied in Japan to more of a common practice where rather than being seen as an option or than as the exception, but seeing more as an option?
Mhm. Well, it's a really good question. And it's quite I don't know, there's always this question surrounding or no, it's always there when we present when we show this project, but also about Japanese woodworking. There are many cliches, no, or because many people think that actually all this craftsmanship really I mean, I don't know, if you open Instagram and then you go to Japanese woodworking, you are going to see so amazing videos about super precise or temple construction or no, but actually in Japan there is I mean, Japanese always has this high technology versus craftsmanship, no, but they apply all their highest technology to craftsmanship. So there is not, I mean, these specific ways of building there are some companies of carpenters that actually use them. There is also shrine and temple building, which has to be like that because it has is the regular process. But actually there is a lot of high technology building in wood, no? It's just a matter of culture. I think that in Japan, wood is present everywhere, and you can experience wood through architecture, traditional architecture, also as a culture in objects, since you are no during your whole life, and it's easier to that they appreciate that. So I believe that trying to implement this kind of solutions is also trying to open our mind. I don't know a specific one. In United States, actually you have a wider culture, no, on woodworking, but actually here in Spain, we have to fight constantly with this kind of stone and brick and concrete is the strength in architecture, no? But actually you can see buildings in Japan that last right now for 1,000 years and they are building wood. So with this I don't know, earthquakes with no, really strong earthquakes, no? So I think that to be an option is just to try to adapt technology and the industry and the construction industry in that direction, no? Try to adapt it. So there are solutions, and actually there are. For example, you can find I mean, what happened in Slovenia is actually that the Austrian and the Germans has a high technology in wood, no? And also this is Slovenian carpenter family. They have implemented that, no? So it could be an option if we all collaborate in that way, no? And if we start believing and talking to the clients that this is a possibility, because, and just to finish, one thing that is happening a lot that we are talking about carbon emissions, no, and being more sustainable, being more. But if you go around your city, I don't know there, but at least in Madrid, you are going to see a lot of concrete, a lot of brick, a lot of traditional construction methods that are not really helping on trying to change not only industry, but also how architecture is going to become more sustainable. So I think just to create the option is just to create the culture that is around construction as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense in terms of because it feels like you'd have to create this whole shift and create an appreciation and doing that through culture. Yeah. Thank you guys.
Pressure.
Okay, looks like Cole has a comment or has a question.
Yeah, I had a question for Sophia and Miguel. I noticed a lot of your work involved refurbishment and reusing old buildings. And I was curious if you have an established logic or process that you use when approaching these projects, especially in considering the relation between the old and the new components.
I would say just do the less against and do the most with the existing. Does that make sense? Maybe. I don't know. Like, I don't know, just but you can add anything.
I don't know. It's just you mentioned the furniture that right now we presented these two projects, but actually it's like I don't know, the final process, the final outcome of a process. And actually we spent like 2 or 3 years doing furniture, and like as a survival method. No, like there's no architecture client, so let's do furniture and let's try to do, I don't know, benches or cafeteria or whatever, you know, trying to do everything. That's how the workshop started. So I believe that once you start working with furniture, then you think in another scale. And at the same time, you start respecting, I mean, I don't know, you are doing the furniture, so you have to deal with what is existent. So at some point, you start respecting that what is around, no? Not just, no, I'm going to clean everything and do whatever I want. No, it's just I have to deal with this. I have to adapt. I have to level the furniture. I have to be, I don't know, innovative and try to find solutions. So I think that you have to be really cheap and really fast and really. So I think that creates a pattern of how you then react to new clients or new possibilities. Or so when we had these refurbishments or trying to give solutions to, for example, historical buildings, that's something that we are doing right now in a couple of projects. Well, I don't know, for example, sometimes refurbish or renovate, it makes the client to save more square meters, or I don't know, there are many possibilities just to study. It was more complex, it takes more of your time probably, but I mean, it's always easier to demolish and build something new, and that's it. But going in that direction, sometimes it helps the client, and also it helps also to create a better environment for sustainable architecture.
And I think it plays in your favor because a pre-existence, it's already there. So the language, it's already there, and you don't have to invent or create anything out of nothing. No, so it's quite smart just to see what's there and consolidate it.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to be working with an existing historical building for my upcoming thesis project. So I'm just kind of curious on how different professionals kind of gauge and go about that process. So thank you.
I've got another question for the both of you guys. And it came from your guys' presentation. I'm curious, you guys both spoke about not being able to communicate with your clients, and obviously there are two very different like clients, but I'm curious if you guys have any like insights or strategies or just general observations of how that went. So I would love to hear from both of you guys.
Well, talk about the house too. I mean, it was really difficult doing a home or a project that wasn't local. So we could only be there, you know, every 2 months or so. So communicating actually through images was the best form of communicating. You know, drawings and photographs kind of speak for themselves and act as a sort of language in and of themselves. It's a universal language. So that's kind of, we were constantly receiving photos from our clients, you know, walking around the site being like, are you sure this looks right? Or this looks a little off. And then we, you know, receive the image and mark it up and send it back to the contractor.
But yeah, it was interesting seeing what photos they would take from their perspective, and sort of just like, instead of us being there and picking up on certain issues through construction, we would be seeing what they're picking up and sort of getting that automatic understanding of what's important to them and their values. So that was a kind of interesting development that, it was a challenge at first, but then we started to see the benefits of working that way remotely and collaborating.
Cool. Yeah, it seems like a interesting way to like remove your bias and step back and look through their eyes. That's an interesting way to think about it.
It seems like there are also a couple of questions in
Yeah.
the chat, but maybe Nick, if you want, after those questions, I'm sure our guests have to go at some point.
Oh,
Maybe we
okay,
can
for
read
sure,
those.
for sure. Well, looks like Sadie just raised her hand.
Yeah, I had a question for Becker too, and I'm really interested in this idea that you guys talk about, like recasting objects in different roles with those cement blocks. And could you just talk a little bit more about that and like what that means on like a larger scale?
So it could be literally taking forms that are used for something like a cinder block and then just using it for something else, like a side table, right? In that example, but I think for us, it's also historical context, hence the kind of the precedent of the dog trot, or just looking at the Chicago 2 flat and completely rethinking what that typology is or means today. Maybe it doesn't make sense to make the historic dog trot in today, or it's just more interesting to us to kind of figure out a way to like completely reinvent it.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to our title, ways of seeing, I think this idea of like seeing things in a new light. It's like we always try to find a different way of thinking about something, and in almost like we try to, it's kind of there's like these two forces. It's like in one way, we're trying to be contextual in our designs always, and kind of sensitive to context and conscientious of context. But at the same time, we're trying to take things out of their context to see them in a new way, and to potentially like work with them in a way that, maybe hasn't been done before, or hasn't been at least thought of before. So yeah, for the CMU side table, it was just taking something banal and then transforming how it's viewed and giving it a new value maybe in society that's not its conventional sort of status.
No, yeah, I just find that super interesting. My thesis, I'm kind of exploring those historic typologies and what that looks like now. And yeah, it was really interesting to see your approach.
Part of the historical context too sometimes is just a mode of like convincing or creating like a narrative around your building or proposal, so that the client just has a better understanding that you're not just like coming in and proposing something that won't fit in. It's just a way of kind of like relating maybe more to the context and the people that you're working with.
Yeah, I would say especially for that, the missing middle competition, that was something that was at the forefront of our minds, that, how do we reinvent something without offending everyone in the neighborhood, right? Or like the public that the neighborhoods that these buildings are proposed for. And so
and people here are very conservative in terms of what they like in terms of design.
Yeah. I think Chicago is generally a more conservative context, design wise.
Sorry. Okay. Pablo, you got a question. I was just about to ask one in the chat, but I'll let you ask your question.
I think maybe it's more of a comment or with a question at the end, but I always tend to do this. I'm a bit chaotic. Yeah, thanks so much for the presentations. I was so happy to see a bit more of your process and to see a bit of the drawings and a bit of the behind the scenes, also construction photographs. Really amazing, both practices. And I think if I could number, a couple of things that you're also talking about, again, as a kind of like generational X-ray or cross-section of how we work, how we see things, right? There are a lot of overlaps in how, time is a vector, right? And we learn through time, and that affects our ways of seeing or our constant kind of like in process, in the making. But also this tension between local and working hyper locally and hyper specifically through observation or through learning from local typologies and reapplying them or reimagining them in different ways, right? And the global, right? And understanding like a global context, like what Miguel was talking about before, that maybe sustainability through timber construction, right, is something that is a kind of global approach right now, but how does it adapt to different contexts? So I wanted to kind of ask, let's say like a small question regarding your works, right? I think both of you are showing works that could be considered, let's say, first or second, third, but generally more or less first works that will be published everywhere, I'm sure, as soon as they're finished. And I also for the students and for myself, I wanted to know a little bit more about what you found as a surprise or a remarkable takeaway or an unexpected moment from the finished product, right? So from what you had imagined through a kind of like a super precise model or a drawing or a diagram to the finished project, right? Whether it's through scale, materiality, experience, what's the like takeaway of that first work?
I can go. Okay. For me, especially for the kindergarten, what was really I don't know, like crucial, or like I don't know, it was like, of course you dedicate a lot of time in a plan, in a section, and from our side we insisted a lot in some parts of the project that were the proportions of the size of the things and the heights, no, everything that happened in the section was like we were like so on it, no, like all the time. And then when I think the second time we visited the school, then we had the proper building, the volume of the 3 buildings there, no, and the feeling of like looking at it was a big building, and you never know, you are drawing in a plan, but you actually doesn't know the scale of the things, no, and how it's going to look like in a very large scale, in a very powerful landscape. And like, okay, you're a bit scared, no? And when you see that and you say, okay, like I'm happy with how it went, no? Like I think for me was really touching, no? The translation from the plan to the scale of things, and to see, oh, this is the real proportion. Like it's actually
It's welcoming, no?
Yes.
It's welcoming people, no?
It's a relief.
But it also happens like in a smaller scale, like not just because there is a big building, but actually I don't know how many times I measured the eave length for this house, no? Like I don't know, so many times. Also also in the model, it was like, I don't know, this model is like, it's too long, it's not, it's like, is everything working or not? Then going to the site and then see it and measure it again. And that all that process once and again, it is true that I don't know, there is not always like the possibility of I don't know, it's not possible to predict how everything's going to
look
look like, no? And it's something that you,
which is nice also.
no, I mean, there's no,
Mm.
I mean, Sophia answered one, but this is our relationship all the time. The other, I was thinking at the same time that it's the same. There's this beautiful passage in Richard Sennett's The Craftsman. This book is really beautiful. I mean, really famous now, but there's a part when he's comparing like the traditional craftsman workshop and the Diderot Encyclopedia workshop, no? Like in Diderot's encyclopedia, all the workshops look so nice, no? Because at that time, no, the book didn't want to reflect that actually a workshop is a terrible place, no, completely demolished, and so I find beautiful that actually in the workshop, like trying or testing or like it's in there when you actually made the decisions, no? I mean, if you, even though you do the model, probably the right decision is when you are doing something completely aside from the process, no? So everything's like happening in the process, but not specifically on the way, on the moment that you are thinking something or conceiving something, no? So well, just
Yeah.
I don't know how you see it, Robert and Sarah.
Yeah, I completely agree with the scale. I think is for us the biggest surprise always when we're on site. Like we made a super detailed Rhino model of the house, you know, trying to simulate every single condition and material and everything, but there's really no zooming around in a Rhino model is not the same as walking around on site.
I tend to think that like models actually do a really good job at like approximating reality. So I think that they're actually a really good tool for understanding scale in particular. Our concept model didn't really do that because it was so abstract. If we had done a more detailed model of, you know, our building, I think we would have had a better grasp of it. We're happy with the way that the house turned out in terms of the scale. But it was sort of surprising how like kind of big and hefty it felt actually. We thought it was a much smaller, everything was just smaller. And so in reality, it's bigger.
The other thing that was really surprising to me, especially on this latest site visit that we just came back from, was just the lighting in the space and how it changed throughout the day. That's something that's just really hard to, you know or simulate ahead of time. And it's like, once you are in a finished space, like experiencing that change and knowing that time is also this like variable in your design is really a nice surprise.
I feel like the best thing to do is like attack your project from as many different angles as possible, like draw plans. I mean, obviously you have to like draw through a whole drawing site. So you got to do plans, you got to do sections, details, all of that. But like make a concept model, make a more finished model, do renders, make a 3D model, just to kind of view it in as many ways as possible to get the full story, which we didn't necessarily do for the house, and we might do, you know, in the future. But it's also a balance because you don't always have the time to make a million different forms of representation.
But I also think it's important to allow yourself to be surprised, and with, you know, whatever you're building and representing.
Yeah, that is the best part, maybe, is the surprise.
Totally. Also, one thing that you were saying right now, actually, when you like collaborate between both of you, no, actually, it is funny because even though we didn't show any renders, no, Sophia does really like amazing renders, and is really good at this digital part, and it's like I'm totally zero. I mean, completely analog. No, sometimes I feel a little guilty, but but at some point,
don't
like
renders. Really.
No, but it's
Like,
yeah, but it's really useful. You control the tool.
yeah.
No, I mean
Yes.
it's a really useful tool, and Sophia is like master in that tool. No, it's true. But at some point, like both tools needs the other, no? So sometimes, even though I can do a lot of mock-ups and carpentry and whatever, is like, please, Sophia, can you do a small render about this?
But then you need the model. I think even though we have the best render, we couldn't.
Yeah, but
still,
well, it's like,
yeah.
otherwise,
it's funny. I mean, we're giving in a couple of days. Laura and I we're talking. We're doing like a small talk about our models and how we use models in a very similar way to both of you, to both practices as a kind of verification tool, right? For example, as the closest thing to reality, even to simulate light. That you can use, right? But we have to confess here in this group that we have here that we also do renderings when we have to. Just as I guess this is more an anecdote, and then I'll hand it over to Laura, who I guess wants to ask a question. But the director of the school has been following a number of talks, and the one thing that he pointed out from this generation of architects that we have here sharing their work is that he was like, you don't do renderings anymore. Like no one does renderings anymore. What's going on? So maybe it's for me it's kind of like we're part of a post-digital discourse, right? Where we have seen the limits and the constraints and how tricky it is to allow digital tools to design, and we kind of like go back to other ways of representing and working that we can engage with more, and we can in a way control more, right? Especially if we were talking about precision and messiness at the same time. The model is the kind of, and the drawing are the perfect things that we can use.
Yeah, maybe I was just thinking, Pablo, maybe we'll take this video and show it in place of our lecture, and that's it. Convincing enough. I wanted to, I think that we're like touching so much around this theme about the process of designing and control, and perhaps the most interesting thing is learning how to lose control, or how to anticipate the things which you can't anticipate in a construction process, and somehow making that about introducing that as a kind of positive thing, or like a tool even into the design of a building. So leaving some things unsaid or unthought of, or maybe thought of, but allowing someone else to make the decisions for you, or allowing the process to make the decision for you, which, in a way is somehow what happens when you work with a model anyway, right? Because the materiality and the kind of set of elements that emerge from the making of the model, similarly to making of a building, has a kind of a good degree of the unexpected. And I guess I wanted to hear what you guys have to say about that. I mean, we've been kind of talking about that, but like just more kind of directly on this question of the losing control and the unexpected, because also it's funny enough become somehow a theme across the various sessions that we've had for this seminar. And I think it's super interesting as a way of practice. Yeah, so anyway, either of you guys, I'd love to hear from both of you.
Who's start? No, go on.
Okay. You go.
Let's see.
Well, I think this idea of like the architect, not being the architect. I mean, there's never one architect or one designer, but I think not of architects being in, I guess, dictating the design, but sort of guiding it in a way that can, the client, whoever it is receptive to and will be beneficial to the client. Like in some ways, I see our job as a kind of like guidance counselor of like design guidance counselor or something, where we're trying to put the ideas in place that can maybe like benefit a project or a way of living, and then more organically letting the client themselves make the final decisions of what they want for their space. That's at least kind of what we experienced with the house. I think our clients had very strong ideas about certain styles and elements and features that they wanted in their design, and more so than us really designing that was just us providing this kind of framework for thinking about living, this kind of overall more general concept that then they were able to plug their specific desires into.
Which is where the role of the initial concept model came in. There's sort of a party diagram, and then the kind of narrative of the historical narrative. And so constantly through the process, you can kind of re-reference that and make sure that, you know, you're making decisions along the way, but those decisions still have to align with that or fit into that initial concept.
So I think like this idea of abstraction through our representation is really helpful for us to not set in stone some of these details and things that necessarily do end up changing when you're working with the client or during construction. Issues come up and then you have to redesign certain details. So by having that abstraction, it helps keep us on track, I guess, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was thinking during your answer. Well, one thing that you mentioned is actually like try keep this feeling of control, which I don't know. I don't know if I continue to think about that, because actually, at least for me, I completely admit that I continue to develop my woodworking, but also skills in the workshop, because I could have control over things. No? And I believe that at some point, even though you can do everything, no, and it's impossible to have control over everything. And actually, in this red house that we were doing for many years, we had control over everything, also the craftsmanship, and these allow you a lot of creativity. But actually, then you start working in something like Slovenia, and then you feel like that you completely lose control. No. Mm-hmm. Somehow at some point, because there are many people involved and what, you completely feel that you are not capable of making a decision. Just the project just continues, and then you have to trust other people, no? And this idea of control is something that I believe architects learn as well at university, and also during when they start working for another architect. There's this idea of control. It's really huge, no? And having control over everything, also control over others, also control over not being spontaneous, not being, no, it's like trying to capture creativity somehow, no. It's a big topic, but actually I believe that this idea of control is something that you at some point have to learn, that is not, it can be achieved completely. No? And although it can be something like really terrible as well for the architect, no? Because at some point you can be obsessed with control, and then you don't enjoy what you are doing because you are feeling that you lose control. And that's something that for mental health as well is not really good. And also for you as a professional, it doesn't make you it slows your evolution, and it stops your evolution as a professional, because something completely irrational, no, like having control over everything is something that leads to a closed path, no. So I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a reflection. I don't know.
Also understanding like the nature of the project. For example, as Miguel said, the house we're working on, we could, because we had these large all these years, we could achieve these details. But the school first is a public institution, and you shouldn't by trying to go in detail at this scale of a building, you only will make it more and more expensive. So also, for example, public buildings should remain cheap in a way. No, a school should be cheap in a conception.
Unless you build in Switzerland.
Unless Yes.
It's probably,
Yeah, but yeah.
but well, sorry.
No, yeah, it's true. But
Typical joke in Slovenia.
So that thing we learned during the process, no, and we understood that. But yeah, I guess you learn those things when you get like more experience. Like, oh, okay, this is not how we learn. No, the whole project from the beginning to the end. It's like a story, or it's like a fiction in many cases, or once out of, I don't know, 50, no?
Also, I think that in relation with that, I think as a young generation, I think I can speak for many of us, I don't know, but at some point, like previous generations, they were allowed to, I don't know, build a lot, no? So they were like, okay, if I missed something or if I am wrong in this project, well, I can continue to learn in the next project and, I don't know, try to do better, no? And now it's like there are a few opportunities, no, or a few clients and few job opportunities, and you have sometimes to deal with the idea that, well, if I don't do right now, if I don't do my best right now, maybe I won't be able to do it, no? And that makes your feeling or your intention of controlling everything worse, no? Like everything, I have to control it because it's maybe my only chance, no? And that's terrible, but it's part of our generation, I believe.
So we have to let it go.
Yeah, a little bit, perhaps.
Awesome. Well, thanks for those answers. Those are some good answers. We're going to start wrapping it up here. We really appreciate you guys giving us your time here. Some really interesting conversations and some back and forths there. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, this
Thank
was
you.
fun. I hope you guys got something out of this.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
No, that was
Definitely.
I wish I could have taken a class like this when I was in school.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
It's really special, and you guys are really lucky to have this.
Totally, yes.
Thanks so much for that, Robert. It's such a pleasure for us that you guys are willing to put in your time, like out of your lives and your busy schedules to construct these presentations and what you're going to say. And we know perfectly how much time this all takes. So it's really, appreciated that we get to share this moment together.
Definitely.
And yeah, I think we appreciate the opportunity to just reflect on our work too, because it's not something like we're busy in our own worlds. So having this forcing us to think about our work and present it, I think is beneficial for us as well. So thank you for that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you very much for organizing this. For us, amazing nights. But
Thank you. Thanks so much. Well, thanks everybody, and see you soon.
See
And
you.
to our students, we'll see you in a second.
Nice meeting you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Nice meeting you. Bye.
Bye.